And he confessed. He said, I thought the whole time we were working together in Moscow, you were actually KGB.
Wow.
And he said, the one thing that finally proved to me that you were not was that night you gave me the 5 medications to test on my daughter. Because he said, I'm KGB. He said, and I know how we operate. We never would have done it that way.
Welcome back, everybody. We are back today with David Rolph, and we're going to continue our conversation with Dave. We're going to do 2 separate episodes, but they're all going to be real life stories that Dave has. We've talked about a lot of these over the last few months, but we talked a little bit more today specifically about some things that we're going to talk about. And it's really interesting. So I'm really excited to share these with you. Dave's going to share his experiences, whatever we can do in the amount of time that we have. We're going to go get some really good pizza later. And we had a really good breakfast. But we're going to go get pizza after all this is done. And this is actually going to be the last podcast in this set. Me and Holly, we're going to be moving, and we're going to tear all this down. As soon as this is over, we're going to go get pizza, and we're going to come back. We're going to tear it all down, and then we're going to move into a new house at some point, and then we'll be back up and running. But this is
stay tuned for the new setup.
The swan song.
To be determined.
Studio.
This is it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to keep this same look. We've been going back and forth about that, but either way, we will be back down the road at some point. But Dave, welcome again. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about some of this stuff. When you came here, you showed us some pictures earlier. It's super cool to see those pictures of the actual people that you had relationships with, that were working with the CIA and things like that. I don't know. What do you think?
I love it. I mean, it's I think it's a real privilege to be talking to you, because not only, obviously, we've developed such a beautiful friendship, and I feel fortunate for that, and to hear the stories that you real life experienced is insane. I mean, it's just so cool. So cool, Dave.
Well, it's oftentimes a lot different than you read about in James Bond novels. It doesn't quite have that level of, high energy all the time. And, there's a lot of other mundane things, but most, involved in an operation you used to go out and do. You plan for weeks and, certainly days to prepare for these things. You have to come into the game, so to speak, with a lot of knowledge of the environment you're working in. And I don't mean just the knowledge of, where is the corner of 5th and Main? What is the geography of the land?
Right.
But it's you have to understand
the context
to operate successfully. What that whole country and the people are like. In some cases, it could be different tribes, tribal areas, ethnicity, religion. So where do their customs come from? Even understanding their literature and their music, and all those things impact how a person is going to relate to you on the street.
Sure.
And it also has to do with just local customs, traditions. When do they have celebrations? And this is especially true when you're in a place like Eastern Europe or the Soviet Union.
It's the history.
The history is important to understand. Some of these assets, the people we worked with, were very interested in. You talk about what do you give them? What do they get out of the relationship? Well, in some cases, they wanted to get copies of their own literature, because their own literature was not available to them in the society. And so sometimes they call it dissident literature, or literature that's Solzhenitsyn, for example, was never sold in the Soviet stores back in the day. And so oftentimes I'd go to meet somebody, and what he'd want is a copy of Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, and in some cases, a copy of the Bible.
Wow.
They couldn't get that. So, And that was all in many respects based on your knowledge and understanding of the people and what they had access to, what they were interested in.
Which we covered a lot of in our last episode when we talked a lot about what even brought you to the CIA in the first place, which was just as it happened, I think what lined you up for that was your fascination with Russian culture and the Russian history. So, and if any of you are interested, and if you didn't get a chance to see that last episode, we will link that up in the top corner of our video right here, and that way you can see, check that out, because that's super fascinating as well. But
that's very true. So I mean, that's sort of the foundation of it. You have to have just an inherent interest in the people in the country. You then have to know or gather knowledge, learn about what that country's counterintelligence services, what kind of a threat they pose to you, and what kind of equipment, what kind of techniques do they bring to the table when you're out there operating. So it's always a little bit of a chess game between your planning and their planning. Now, they don't necessarily know the date and time you're going to do something. And so, they plan for all sorts of contingencies. But, in a way, you're doing the same thing. And then finally, the third pillar, so to speak, that hold that all together is your area knowledge, your knowledge of what the counterintelligence service may or may not bring to the table against you. The third pillar is just the practice of your own, what we call tradecraft, the practice of your learned skills in the trade.
Right.
So those are the three pillars that support successful operations, and none of them have to do with ejection seats in cars, and
there's no
hidden
thing
compartments
that throws out like those spike things in the underneath the car.
Never used one of those.
Flattened tires. And
that's not to say we don't employ technology.
Sure,
we employ a lot of technology, in many of the areas I worked in. It was a heavy reliance on disguise.
You told some stories about that.
Lots of disguise activity. And electronics in the way of radios and monitoring equipment, because the opposition service was always up on the radio talking about you when you were out on the street, if they were following you. And so you'd have to understand what their codes were, their various little, they have a special language all their own when they're operating against you. So they'll talk with numbers. In terms of turning right, might be the number 8 or 8 in Russian, or left might be 9, and going over a bridge might be 5. So if you're driving along and you don't necessarily see a car behind you, but if you have a little earpiece in that's monitoring some of their frequencies, and you hear them say 8
every time you turn,
somebody just made a right turn, and then you say, well, I don't know if it's me or somebody else, and then you're going over a bridge and you hear piat piat piat. That
you start to understand.
You start to realize that somebody is calling out your exact movements. So that's technology assisting. Sure. So there's it's you weave it all together and you come up with hopefully a successful operation.
It's interesting because when we were talking this morning, I guess you always kind of expect that, when you're in this field, that everything's happening like it does in the movies. You know what I mean? It's perfect and everything works out just great. But 3 times this morning, you told me about things that you learned along the way. You know what I mean? And they were really important things.
Yeah.
It's one thing. I work with students in this business, and the one thing I emphasize to them is when they're working with me in a school situation, they're obviously there to learn, but it's very important to understand that learning doesn't stop with school. Every single operation that you're involved in. You learn something new, get a different perspective on it, a different insight. And you learn from your colleagues, obviously, who bring different experiences to the table. But you learn from the assets. People sometimes call them agents.
Yeah.
I prefer to call them assets. You learn from them. And that learning never stops. I mean, I've been in the business now for many years, and every day goes by, I pick up some little nuance or different way of maybe doing things or expressing things. So,
and is it fair to say that those experiences kind of build an instinct that you have about your practice?
They do. I mean, how you handle yourself in the field and on the street is going to be a sum total of those things you've experienced. Now, that said, where else do you get these insights from? You know, your colleagues in the office, a chief or a chief of operations, or in our case, a station chief, will share their experience. You learn from them. Two of the most complex operations I was ever involved in involved Victor Sheymov and Tolkachev, who $1 Billion Spy is about. And yet these were my first tour. I was just finished our training program in the CIA at what they call the farm, and so I arrived in Moscow as a brand new officer, my first overseas tour, and for luck, happenstance, or whatever, both Victor Sheymov and Tolkachev fell into my lap. But I was assigned those cases by the chief of station, and so it wasn't that I was bringing a wealth of operational knowledge to the table. So you have to be kind of a quick learner and pick that up. I had a wealth of knowledge about Russia and the Soviet Union, but not about the operations themselves. I couldn't say, well, you know, I've been at this for 10 years or 15 years, and I bring all that to the table. That was not the case.
I have this question because you brought up disguises earlier before we talk about Sheymov. And I remember months ago we had talked about this, you know, because I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people have seen like the Mission Impossible movies and stuff like that, where they have the mask and they rip it off, but the mask looks like it's real, like it's a real person. Yeah. And I remember asking you about that, and you're like, "Yeah, it does.
It looks like a real person. There's no question."
This was back in the 80s, right?
Well, it was in the 70s and 80s, late 70s was we really started using extensive disguise. I guess for years they'd had paste-on mustaches and things like that, you know, kind of phony stuff. But the real sophisticated disguises had their advent in the late 70s, early 80s. You saw it in places like, you know, like the movie Planet of the Apes or something like that, where you have this extensive disguise where you turn a human being into an ape. Well, if you can turn a human being into an ape, you can make me look like a Russian. I mean, you can make me look like a lot of times it's not so much to make you look so much like a different nationality, but it's a change in age.
Okay.
If I was 33 years old when I was in Moscow the first time, I could use disguise to make myself look like somebody who was 60 years old, you know, and they were very effective. The earliest overhead masks were not as technologically advanced as you might think. They forgot to put things in, like, you know, holes for your nose to breathe, and so when you'd breathe, you know, the mask would sort of inflate and deflate.
You cut your own hole, or what?
Well, you modified it. But the later versions of this mask were completely articulated. In other words, the eyelids would work. You know, the breathing was fine. Everything, and they constantly made improvements on just the technology of the facial features and everything else. So, and the proof is in the pudding. They worked. You know, they worked. But more than that, one of the techniques that I used was not so much a mask. I used them from time to time, but a thing we called identity transfer. And identity transfer was, before you even left for your assignment, they knew another person who was going out there that you had about the same physique, you had the same height, kind of the same weight, the same gait. And before you left, before he left and you left, you would work together with our disguise technicians to come up with makeup that would make me look as close to exactly like this other guy as I could. And that makeup was not, we did that with a mask, it was applied, whether it was facial hair and other features. So then when we would get deployed, this was a person, your identity
your body
transfer.
double.
We called him your identity transfer, a donor. He was a donor. But basically that, a body double. And he was assigned to a place in the embassy or the collection platform where it was very unlikely he would get surveillance just because of his job, just because of his duties and history. People in his job before had not got surveillance because they weren't considered as a threat by the opposition.
Operational or whatever.
So like some of our technicians, the technicians, the opposition knew that we didn't send technicians out to handle assets. And so my donor would be a technician. Now, it wouldn't guarantee anything because on any given day, he might get occasional surveillance. So, whereas I would get 24/7 surveillance all the time. So if I went out as him, there'd be a percentage chance that I wouldn't get surveillance. And if I could use that identity transfer technique to get out of the embassy and out into town, then you're pretty well free and clear.
Or did it ever go where like they would make the technician look like you and have them leave and
No, the technician would always, the way it worked was I'd come into the embassy, for example, and in fact, my wife and I would come into the embassy, and it would be after work. We'd be dressed, looking like going to a dinner party, and so we'd disappear into the embassy and go up back stairs and cross corridors and things, and there, any given night, some high-ranking officer in the embassy would be having a dinner party, and so we go into this actually non-dinner party. We go into the apartment where my donor lived, and we'd come into his apartment, and as long as I was still in the apartment, he'd be talking like he was in the apartment. So if there was any bugging or penetration, audio penetration in his apartment, it would look to the listeners like he was still there. And then one of his friends or associates, also a technician, would come by and say, "Hey, are you ready to go?" And he would say, "Yeah." And so I would leave with the other technician. We'd go out, get in a vehicle, and we'd drive out of the embassy. It would look like the one technician and my donor would be leaving together. Yet the donor was still up in the apartment. He never left. And my wife would stay up there too. Now, she had no business being in the donor's apartment, so she couldn't talk. First, I'd be gone for maybe 4 hours, and that would mean for those 4 hours, the donor and my wife had just sit in the apartment and stare at the walls. They couldn't talk because
they couldn't alert.
Because my wife's supposed to be at a dinner party, and the donor is supposed to be in his
where you are,
where I am. So so basically we'd be out doing the operation, and the apartment in theory would be empty, although there'd be two people sitting in it.
And is your wife in on this? Like, she knows what's going on?
Oh yeah, no. Before we would go overseas, our wives go to schools with us.
Oh, okay.
They go to the same training and they get prepared. And there's no such thing as wives not knowing what you're doing. They're an intimate part of it. There were operations at times where I depend on my wife leaving. Her point, she worked at the school, the Anglo-American school, and she would leave, and I would come in from another location, and then she would pick me up in town. But she had to do a surveillance detection run, on her way to pick me up. So it was they're fully engaged.
How does that work though? I mean, I feel silly asking this, but like, is it like you're already in? Are you like, hey, sweetie, like you're gonna have to go to training because we're gonna do this together? You know what I mean? Or like, how does that work? Or is she already a case officer as well, and then you guys get married? Or
sometimes she's already an employee, but no, in my case, she wasn't. And so when I applied to the agency, when I got accepted, I told her that I was accepted in the agency, and before the assignment, she was told that, "Are you willing to go through this training?"
Got it.
Now I don't know if she had said no, I don't want nothing to do with that. Then would that have impacted negatively my assignment? I don't know. I mean, because it never happened. Most spouses, all spouses that I knew, were more than anxious to get involved and stay involved. So that issue, I never saw that issue come up.
So I always found it, the reason I found the disguise thing so interesting was that, this is like originating like in the 70s ish, you know what I mean? And that, as time goes on, technology gets so much better. So I can't even imagine what it must be like today if it were that good then.
Well, I guess that's the case.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure because I retired, several years ago.
Sure.
And I don't know what they're doing today, but you're absolutely right. In all of the technology we use, there's going to be advancements. Just those overhead masks, they went from version 1, which sort of inflated with your breath, which is a very primitive model. Before I left, we were up to version 5.
Wow!
And version 5 was
it significantly better than 1?
Most definitely, yeah. It was. It had improvements with every new model.
How long would it take you to get that set up?
Oh, you mean to apply it?
Yeah.
With an overhead mask, with the makeup, when identity transfer, I could get prepared in maybe half an hour.
And what about an overhead mask?
Seconds,
because I always wondered, like you pull this thing over your head, like is it just sucked in here and you don't need to like glue it down or anything, or
more or less?
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
But it's an easy application.
Okay.
Now, if I wanted to just do little fine tuning adjustments, that it might take 15 minutes, 10 minutes. But the thing is, usually with identity transfer or overhead masks. The only thing you're doing is trying to fool the guards at the embassy, the observation posts near the embassy.
But it's all from a distance, right?
But
so it's not like
it could be as close as a guard leaving the embassy. If I was in the passenger seat of a van and I drove out with my buddy, the other technician, the policeman would be probably 2 or 3 feet from as we drove past him. But the difference is that we kept the windows a little dirty, and it was at night. So at night, dirty windows, and he's not paying too much attention anyway to the individuals. And you get by him, and you have to worry about the observation posts. But once you break that perimeter, the masks wouldn't have to be perfect because you're going to take them off anyway and then reapply them before you go back in, and so it was a mask doesn't have to be perfect for like when you're meeting with your asset. Your asset knows you as you.
Sure.
If I showed up as my donor, he wouldn't say, who are you? I don't know you. And it's the same thing with a mask. I mean, could you conduct the meeting with a mask? Of course you could, but there'd be no point in putting yourself through that. It's not a comfortable thing to wear.
Yeah.
And if you're out there for 2 or 3 hours, you'd want to have it off, you know.
At that time, did they have one where we could be sitting like this and you would be like, okay, I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like where, you know,
where you
lighting,
notice it or something.
Everything like that.
Yes. Is the answer. I mean, would it pass under real close scrutiny if I was arrested and dragged into the police station and they had me under floodlights and they were looking at no, then that would be the end of it. I mean, you know,
but you could have a conversation like this with somebody about the same distance, and you could
yeah.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
That's impressive.
That's cool.
No, it is. So like the whole Mission Impossible, they peel it off. It's for real.
It's with certain differences.
I
mean, I think the ones in Mission Impossible are probably a little better than ours. I mean, but because those, they gave you the impression watching the TV series that you could wear these masks and just go into a normal business office or a conference or be sitting there interacting with a table full of colleagues. And no, that wouldn't work with our masks to get through a perimeter. And but like one time when one of my friends, colleagues in the station, he went out of the station. I didn't know what his masks looked like. He had a couple overhead masks, and I was sitting at my desk in the station, and I look up. I hear the door open, and I look up, and I see this. It looks like a 60-year-old Russian guy walk in, and I was about to stand up and say, "What the heck?" And pull the alarm, and and hit the floor, and but it worked, But he was like 20 feet away from me,
sure,
and it wasn't like flood lighting; it was normal office lighting.
Yeah.
But for normal office lighting, 20 feet away, it looked darn good.
That's pretty cool.
It really was.
That's really cool.
But I mean, clearly, had I got up and sat right next to him at his desk,
you could have noticed some things, right?
You would have noticed certain things wrong. I mean, it's plastic skin. Let's face it. It's not skin. It's and it doesn't sweat. You don't see beads of sweat coming out of it. There's little indicators that it's not that good. It's not that good.
So let's get into the first real life story. Let's talk about Victor Sheymov.
Yeah.
You started off, like he was, somebody you worked with. You tell the story about that.
Like he was a volunteer. He
Russian.
He was Russian. He was a Soviet major in the KGB, and a person at that level, that rank, that organization, he would be much too high a profile for him to walk into the U.S. embassy. So he waited for he was a cryptographer, so he's into cryptology, and he was constantly taking trips to cities to work with the Soviet cryptographic stuff in their embassy. And so on a trip to Warsaw in Poland, he had a little more freedom of movement around the city because Warsaw was a Warsaw Pact nation. They were Soviet allies at the time. And so he could wander around the city and not have a lot of scrutiny placed on him. He excuse me, during a trip to Warsaw, he came into the American embassy. And they basically said, I have information for the Americans. And the people in the embassy are trained to realize what a volunteer might or might not look like or say, and they identified or concluded he was, a Russian, and he wanted to talk to somebody. So they brought somebody from our station in Warsaw down. Well, unfortunately, the officer in Warsaw did not speak Russian, and nor did Victor speak Polish. So, but through using little sketches and kind of hand signals and stuff, and identification cards, he indicated he was a KGB officer and he would like to cooperate with us.
What year is this?
This would have been 1979.
Okay,
and so they made up a very, very primitive communications plan. They basically told Victor, well, is there an address? Not your address, but is there an address we can send mail to you that would be always handed over to you, delivered to you, not your own address? And Victor said, well, you could always send a note or letter to my father. And so what we did, we got the father's address, and we said, when you receive this letter, a letter from, let's say, your old friend Yvonne, open it up. You don't know Yvonne; it's a made-up name, and you can just tell your father it's an old friend of yours from college or something like that, writing you a note. And your father will hand you the envelope from Yvonne, say, "Oh, this letter came from you." You had given Yvonne your father's name because you didn't know where you'd be after college, and so. Bottom line is the letter comes in, and when you get it, don't worry what it says in the letter. That's just going to be a phony letter from your old friend Yvonne, who doesn't exist. We gave him a little formula that he could use, household type stuff, that if he mixed it in some water and stirred it all up, poured it in a pan and put the letter in the pan, then the back of the letter, which was blank, it was like we call SW, secret writing. Wow. A note would appear, and it would give Victor, that note would give Victor a place to mark a signal. And it would also give him another site that after the signal was marked, a place where we would meet him. And time, place and time.
Yeah.
So off he went. He left Warsaw and went back to Moscow. And then that's when we start having to think, are they just trying to draw us out? Is this a provocation? They just want an American to come out of the embassy to try to meet this guy, Victor, and they're going to arrest us on the street, make a big flap, an embarrassment. So we decided, based on some of the things he had mentioned in Warsaw, some of the things he had produced and showed them, we figured it was a better than even chance that this guy was legitimate. And if he was legitimately a KGB cryptographer, are you kidding me? That's like the gem of gems. It's like the keys to the kingdom. We have so much in the way of Soviet transmissions, embassy to embassy, that are all encrypted.
So he was worth the risk.
He was worth a lot of risk if he was real. And we would be able to, with his help, potentially break into a lot of Soviet encrypted messages that we had no idea what they were about.
Yeah.
So we call that the keys to the kingdom. You see? And that's basically what he represented. So everybody was willing to take a little more of a chance in meeting this guy, because if he was real, he could be extremely valuable. If he was bad, all we end up is losing one officer in the station who gets arrested, spends one uncomfortable night in Lubyanka getting interrogated, and then is PNG'd the next day and sent home. Well, who do you give that to except the new guy on the block?
It worked out for you.
So it worked out for me. And I think when the chief of station gave me the nod to take that case, it was probably because in the back of his mind, he didn't think it was going to happen. It wasn't going to go anywhere. He wasn't trying to put me up to get arrested.
Sure.
But he thought, well, Victor will never show up. He'll get cold feet. I'll waste a couple nights trying to find him, and then it'll go away. So we mailed a letter to Victor's father. And we assumed that the father gave it to him and that he developed it, because about 2 or 3 weeks after we mailed it, it was a signal site. It was on the side of a building where Victor would go and mark a V, a Roman V, like a like a V. And on every Sunday morning, it was my normal drive on Sunday. I'd go into the embassy and I'd pass that particular site. And sure enough, 3 weeks after we mailed the envelope to Victor, a V shows up at that site.
And is that the picture that you...
Yes, yeah. So that was his signal that he made that kicked off the operation. And what that V meant to me when I saw it on a Sunday, it meant that not the next day, not the Monday there, but a week from the next Monday, that I would have to show up at the site we gave him, which was at a metro station, at the base of a statue at a metro station. Metro being their subway, the underground. And so sure enough, I got to that metro station a week from Monday, and
there he was.
There he was. Guy walks up, and
wow.
I walked up to him, and we shook hands, and that's what kicked off the operation.
Wow.
So like the context of this whole situation, like obviously, there were defectors. What was Sheymov's motivation for wanting to reach out in the first place? Why would somebody in that environment do something like that, take that kind of risk?
Well, with Victor's motivation for doing this, for coming to us in the first place, you might read his book, The Tower of Secrets, which he wrote after he got to the United States. It was like an autobiographical account of what caused him to, over time, over the period of his professional career, to become completely disillusioned with the Soviet system.
Yeah.
It had to do with his disillusionment about he was intimately familiar with how the KGB, their security service, worked, and how invasive and intrusive they were in the lives of their own people. And he also was concerned about the lack of freedom of the press and freedom of expression and all the different freedoms that people elsewhere would enjoy that were not available to him. And so over a period of time, it just
ate away at him. Huh?
Yeah, basically to the point that he said, "That's it. I'm finished with this." He never let on while he was there. He had to
he couldn't
be the well-behaved, obedient KGB officer.
How common do you think it was for Russians in that time period to feel the way Sheymov did? And then how, out of those people, how common was it for somebody to actually be brave enough to do something?
Well, I think hundreds and hundreds of them did feel that way. There was a lot of disillusionment. I even met people that I would say are my Soviet friends who were clearly dissident, but not so dissident as to take the kind of chance that Victor was taking. And you also have to look at the fact that there could be hundreds of dissidents, but they're dissidents who have no access to really proprietary, sensitive information, which is all we're interested in. If you're an artist and you paint beautiful pictures, and that it's dissident art, it shows the picture of poor Soviet peasants in the field.
Yeah.
Well, that might get you a jail sentence, but if you came to us and offered your services, we've got nothing for you. But if you felt that way, and you're a major in the KGB, that's a whole different story.
So you have something to offer.
You have something to offer.
Yeah,
it's going to be a two-way street. And Victor certainly did have something to offer. His production was right out of the gate, very, very high. So he came to the embassy in Warsaw. We established contact with him that night at the statue that you have a picture of. And the first thing he said, you initially are concerned about, well, what do you want? What do you do? Clearly, you want something from us.
Right.
What do you want from us? Well, what he, in addition to, or in return for his production of all the information that he could glean for us on Soviet cryptological, equipment, and he said he wanted to have his family taken to the United States to get out of Russia. His wife and his daughter, and so that was what he wanted in a material way.
Sure.
So so that's really what his motivation was about. A disillusionment with the system and a desire to find a way to get his family out of Russia.
Okay.
And those are two things he could never accomplish on his own.
Sure.
How long did this operation go on for?
Well, when he first said to me on the street, "I want to be taken to the United States with my family," I immediately knew, number one, I didn't have the authority on the street to say, oh, yes, we'll grant you that, because that's a package that has to be put together at a much higher level than I was at the time. But what I could say to him was it's a very complicated challenge. It's going to require a lot of fortitude and bravery and blah blah blah. It's going to take time to get this all arranged properly. And I sort of pulled a number out of the air. I said, let's work together. Let's work together here in Moscow for why don't we say 18 months. Maybe 2 years, and then we'll revisit this idea of you leaving for the United States, and that'd be like a quid pro quo. You work for us and then we'll help you get out.
Yeah.
Well, he understood the common sense reason why he would have to work for a few years to earn his exfiltration. But I said, if you do that, anything's possible. I'm not here to tell you we're not going to do it. We'll certainly work with you to make it happen. And it's going to take time. So what we did, I gave him at that meeting a couple of cameras. These are small disguised cameras that they look like the ones I gave him looked like they were like Bic cigarette lighters, the little snap type lighters.
Are these the Tropel cameras?
Tropel.
Okay.
Yeah, Tropel. And they worked like a lighter, but they also had 60 exposures of film in each one. So it'd be
crazy.
120 pages. And I said, take these cameras into your office and you take pictures of the most sensitive documents you have access to right there on your office desk. And we'll take them back and evaluate them and look at them. And so he did. He took the cameras, and the next week I got 2 Tropels back from him that were completely full, and we sent those to Washington. They developed them, and then they showed them to our cryptologic people. And their answer was very quick. It was almost instantaneous.
Wow.
We don't want this guy out in 2 years. We want him out yesterday. They were that excited by what they saw.
Wow.
It was just the stuff on his desk, and so and then
when they said they want him out, does that mean let's exfiltrate him as quickly as possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Like we want him out yesterday.
Got it. Okay.
We don't want to wait 2 years.
Okay.
How long?
And why was that? Because wouldn't he be more valuable if he was functional, or is it he already had all the knowledge, had everything?
He would. No, you're right. He would be more valuable if he was functional. But the problem is when your functional asset is a KGB officer working in KGB headquarters in Moscow. How long will he be functional? How long will it be before he makes a mistake?
And if he made a mistake, then would that mean that they would be tipped off, and so then they change everything? So
they would be tipped off, so they would change. But worse than that, for him,
sure,
if it went bad,
be a goner.
He'd be a goner. And so basically, what the customer in Washington realized that he could produce a lot more working for 2 years than he could get with Tropels on his desk.
Got it.
But they were willing to sacrifice what he could get in theory in 2 years for what was in his mind right now, for what he obviously knew right in his mind.
And that lined up with a concern for his safety and well-being.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So all things being equal, they were saying, we'd rather have you get him out right away.
Okay.
Because he will still be of significant value.
He was so excited to hear that.
When I went back and told him, change of plans, you're not going to be going in 2 years. Go home and pack your bags, basically.
Whoa.
He was really excited. But the only exfiltration means we had on the shelf for instant use was basically a means of concealing him and driving him across the border in a vehicle. And so it wasn't real sophisticated. It was basically, we'll pick you up at a certain day and time, and you'll
disappear.
Just hide in the back of the vehicle.
Yeah.
But it's good that you mentioned that word, disappear, because the clear advantage of getting him out would be if they didn't realize he had gotten out to the United States, they might not change the ciphers that they were issuing. Because, if he knew that he went to the United States, then obviously ciphers would be changed immediately, and his value would then go down by a certain amount, not totally, but we'd lose the most valuable aspect of that. So we made the exfiltration look like it was what we called disappearance without a trace. So he left his home
intact,
totally intact. They even had food on the table. He let a cigarette burn down in the ashtray, and I mean it looked like we hoped that he and his wife and his daughter just left for an evening stroll, and left everything in the house as they would leave it if they were just going to be gone for a half an hour.
So was the situation in Russia such that it was totally plausible that a family could just be
could just disappear?
Because of crime and stuff like that.
That was the possibility.
Okay,
and that's always looming in the background in Russia, where in the United States, any place you could not rule out the possibility that he had been abducted or killed, and his wife and his child murdered along with him. And the whole idea is we gave them enough ammunition to believe that was a possibility.
Okay.
And when you're talking about the KGB, another thing we're playing on is our knowledge of how they work and their mentality. Because if he's gone, if he disappears, and there's a possibility that it could just be true, it could be true, they'll latch onto that as the solution, because they don't want to admit he went to the United States. Because if they admitted to themselves that he defected, not just the United States,
more
but
evidence that they were.
Well, it would imply that his supervisors didn't realize he was disaffected, and their supervisors didn't supervise them well enough to find that out and determine it in their employees, and would go right up the chain. There'd be so many people if they
the psychology of it.
If they realized that he had defected, how could we have had this flaw existing? This little chink in the armor going on to become a major, and nobody realized it.
And no doubt there'd be a price to pay. Somebody would have to answer for that.
Right up the line.
So there's a cognitive bias there. They want to believe that he just disappeared without a trace.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's cool.
So that was working in our favor, that they would instantly grab on to something that might be plausible, even if it wasn't really that plausible, just to save all their asses, because they couldn't have admitted that there was a flaw in the system they hadn't caught. And so, but the bottom line was we were watching various shipments of crypto gear to embassies around the world from Moscow, and installations. And after he left, if they thought he had defected, those shipments and the installations would have ceased immediately. Yet the shipments went out, they were installed, so they were willing to even potentially compromise their communications all around the world if there was something they could grasp on that he might have just disappeared.
Sure.
And they did. So we watched it for 4 or 5 years, and nothing ever changed. And you know what was heartbreaking? It's not so much heartbreaking because, fortunately, it did not end up in a failed operation or any hurt for them. But when a defector comes to the United States, the CIA doesn't operate in the U.S. They operate abroad. So although we might work with him to get him adjusted in the United States for maybe a year or so, working with his CIA handlers. But eventually he's turned over to be handled by the FBI, by an FBI agent who operate in the United States. And it turned out that about 5 years, this disappearance without a trace worked very well for 5 years. And then all of a sudden, although we didn't realize it at the time, we realized it later, that the FBI person he was turned over to was a guy named Robert Hansen. And Hansen was eventually, in 15 years after that.
So he's a double agent.
He was a double agent. He was arrested.
Gosh.
So we actually turned him over to, unbeknownst to us, a Soviet double agent in Robert Hansen. And we only learned that when Hansen was arrested, and he started confessing to the things he had done. And one of those things was become Victor Sheymov's handler in the U.S. Well, clearly, once he became Victor Sheymov's handler in the U.S., he shared with the Russians that Sheymov was actually in the United States.
What type of, earlier you said ammunition that would lead the KGB to believe that it was just a disappearance without a trace? Like, what would be some examples of that?
Well, I mean, the way we left his apartment.
Okay.
His apartment was, they had like the newspaper still out on the chair in the living room. They had food on the table. There might have been a pot on the stove, although we didn't leave the stove on. We just boiled through the whole thing with food being cooked. I mean, every indication was, and he didn't tell. That was a little bit of a heartbreaker for them. He couldn't tell his mother or his father.
Oh my gosh.
Nor could she. They just, as far as they were concerned, their son just disappeared.
Oh, wow.
So for them, that meant their son was like a victim of murder or something,
so
and nobody
sad.
knew.
Did they ever find out?
We decided that was because it was so emotionally
Sensitive.
wrenching for his parents. We had a woman in the station who went and knocked on the father's door.
Wow.
Where we mailed a letter. And when he opened the door, she said, "You don't know me, but I," and by this time, like a year and a half had gone by. She said, "You don't know me, but I just want to tell you, your son is safe along with his family. No harm has come to them." And I don't know if she went so far as to say he's now in the United States, but he's safe and unharmed. Mm-hmm. So if the mother and father had been sitting there,
some peace.
they could have some peace of mind and close the loop, so to speak. But
wow. You don't even think about that with all of this. Like, you're hearing the story and it's just so exciting and you're like, oh, this is so great. And you don't even think about.
We think about everything. We try to.
He's pretty high-ranking KGB. I mean, how often would it have happened that a KGB officer and his family would just disappear? You know what I mean? It just kind of like...
Well, I don't know how many of the Brits have gotten out, or the French, or I'd like to think a lot, but no, I see what you're driving at, and it's not a very frequent occasion. It's,
it's not just some random agency, it's the KGB. You know what I mean? So in my mind, without knowing anything, it seems like they would immediately just be suspicious of, hey, where'd this guy go and his family?
They were extremely suspicious. I used to say that the guy who was head of the KGB at the time was Yuri Andropov, and he. I like to think that. I mean, if I had been a fly on the wall in his office, So Victor left. They left Moscow on Friday night. We picked him up Saturday morning, and we drove them across the border into Finland on Saturday. And so Monday would come along, and we were really hard trying to figure this out. Monday would come along, and he wouldn't be at work. And they'd probably put a call into his house or something. And then they come back and say, well, we didn't get any answer. There's nobody there. Oh, well, maybe they're visiting his folks or her folks someplace. Tuesday would come along, and now we're probably Monday. That didn't even go into the staff meeting with Ed Rolph. But by Tuesday, if he didn't come in and there was no word from him, then
they're going to be like,
probably it would by Wednesday for sure. It would have been on Rolph's meeting, in his morning staff meeting, that there's a major, Victor Sheymov, we haven't heard from him since basically last Friday.
And who's monitoring the response? Like who, I'm assuming somebody in the CIA is paying attention to what the KGB is doing.
No. That's why I say I want to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Because we had no way of telling. We were just guessing. What would we think would normally happen? When would they know he was gone? When would they know he disappeared? And we figured from Saturday it would go until at the latest Wednesday. They'd send somebody to his apartment. They'd be looking for him.
Yeah, was somebody watching like his apartment to say, hey?
No. Okay. That would not pay. What good would that do us? We wouldn't do things operationally in Moscow unless there was some reason that was driving it.
Got it.
And we wouldn't do an operation like that just out of curiosity. When did they find out? Because we would have to watch the apartment 24/7 to see what they were doing.
Yeah, and like you said, like the real concern was like watching the communications equipment and the all of that. So like if they were still acting normal, then you would assume that they weren't really considering that he had gone to the States.
Or to the West.
Defected.
To the West.
Yeah.
Not just the States. Because you did have, it was really interesting. There is a book out now called The Traitor and the Spy and the Traitor. It's by a British author, Ben McIntyre. Very good book. And it's a story of essentially Aldrich Ames and a British defector named Gordievsky. And so Gordievsky, when I read the book, I didn't know about this, about Gordievsky. He was a high-ranking KGB officer who defected, but in this case, to Britain.
Okay.
And when I read their story, Ben McIntyre told the story of Gordievsky's departure. It was virtually identical to Sheymov's departure in terms of how they pulled it off, except he didn't have a wife and a child going with him. He went by himself. But I mean, even to the point of the route and everything it was like uncanny. And they did that about 4 or 5 years after Sheymov. I think Gordievsky was taken out in 84, 85. Sheymov left in 80. So how in the world we could have hit the nail on the head that closely was just, it boggled my mind, but we did. If Ben McIntyre's story is true, I have no reason to believe it's not true. It sounds very true. Mainly sounds very true because I did it 5 years before he's talking about it, so I knew it could be done. It's not out in left field someplace. But so I guess what I'm emphasizing here is, we would take people out when permitted by circumstances, and so would the Brits, and I imagine so would the French, and so would it was.
I see, a collaborative effort.
I doubt the Zairean intelligence was exfiltrating people from Moscow. They really didn't care, but
How much time had developed from when you initially had met with Sheymov to like when it was like, hey, we need to get this guy out?
Well, that only took about 10 days.
It was that fast.
Yeah,
because
he gave us the cameras within a week. I gave them to him in the first meeting, and
the next week, right?
The next week he gave them back. We instantly secure carriered them to Washington, and the rumor has it that when they got back to Washington, our division chief in the Soviet division pulled in the chief of the Office of Technical Services. And he said, okay, when you take these true propels, get in there and get them developed. I want you, the chief of the division, in there with the technician when he's developing that film. And if anything happens to that film, it doesn't go right, your career is over. Basically, he said, that's it, you're finished. Now, not that the chief of SC Division would have had the authority to end the career of the chief of officer technical services, but
he was stating the obvious.
He was stating the obvious that these have got to come in. Well, they came out perfect.
Wow.
All 120 exposures, enough to allow the customer to say, bring that guy out right away.
Yeah.
And so from the time I first met him, which was like the first week of March in 1980, he crossed over into Finland in mid-May. So March, April, May, 2 months.
Wow.
So then talk about how it actually happened, like how you actually got him and his family out.
Well, that was really pretty simple. I mean, I say it's simple, but we basically had been using a vehicle up in Leningrad that belonged to the U.S. American consulate in Leningrad. So it was plated, the diplomatic plates were on it and all that. And Helsinki is not that far from Leningrad. You can't drive it in a day. You can easily drive it in a day. And so for the folks that lived up in Leningrad, they would use that van on a regular basis to go to Helsinki and load it with groceries and all sorts of goodies from Finland. I mean, anything you bought in Finland would be considered a goodie compared to what you could get in Moscow. And, so they would use it regularly for logistics type of runs. And so the Soviet border patrol people up there at the crossing at a place called Vyborg would be used to it coming across. And the same thing with the Finnish guards on the other side. They would be used to seeing it. It would become a known customer. So what we did was case for a site, some sort of pickup point outside of Leningrad, so that when Victor and his wife took the train that night, Friday night, from Moscow to Leningrad. I say Leningrad, St. Petersburg. It's an overnight train ride. They'd get to St. Petersburg, i.e. Leningrad, early in the morning on Saturday. They would then hop on a bus, a local bus, and that bus would take them out to a site in the woods that we had already cased and given Victor that site. It was just at the base of the old oak tree, out in the woods someplace north of Leningrad. He and his family would wait there, and then at, say, 10 o'clock on whatever the time would be, we estimated the train travel from Leningrad to the site. He had to actually get off at some little village someplace, then walk into the woods. But, that would not be unusual because Russians know the people. They're inveterate mushroom pickers. They go around and dig for mushrooms all over the place. And you never go into a Russian house that doesn't have a bag of these mushrooms.
Wow.
So they could be up there picking mushrooms, and early March would be a time he could do it. And actually, this was May. This time was May, and so he would go to that site. And then the van would drive up at a prearranged time. He would be then stuck into the van with his wife and his child. They'd put in a concealment device, meaning a false bottom in the backside of the van. And away they go. And then it's just a question of once they're picked up, they're going to drive them across the border. And they just remain very quiet in the van. And when we're across the border and everything's done, then we'll knock on the top of the thing and we'll let you out and you'll be fine. But so from his pickup at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning, another couple hours, say between 12 and 1, they get to the border. Take 45 minutes to cross. And we had another van waiting on the Finnish side several miles from the checkpoint into Finland, and they would rendezvous. So the Sheymovs would get out of one van, get into the other, and that second van would take them to the airport, and off they'd go.
So you mentioned his daughter, right? His daughter, the Sheymov's daughter. So how old was she when all of this was taking place?
4.
Okay. So,
Did you see her picture?
No, but let's see her picture.
Yeah, and then so there'd be one picture of her when she's 4, and then.
Oh, look at this.
But these ones were not necessarily going to show.
Yeah, because I don't have their permission to.
Oh, okay.
But so yeah, she was 4 when all this took place, and at that age, our concern was
exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I'm like,
she. I mean, two adults, you could say you have to be very quiet and can't move for 45 minutes or so, and they'll do it. You can 4-year-old. You can. I mean, I've had a 4-year-old, like 4 different times. And
Daddy.
At 4 years old, you can't just say,
"Why are we in this van?
Why are we in a box? Why is it dark? Why am I locked into a box?"
I have to pee."
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So basically, we got sufficient from the medical people. They gave us sufficient medication to make sure she would be sleeping and out of it for about 45 minutes. Which she was. It was successful.
That's so cool.
So he was suspicious of you, but there was that goes with this part of the story.
Oh, yeah. Well, anytime you're meeting somebody under those conditions, and he is KGB, we knew that, and he assumed we must be intelligence officers also, or what the heck are we doing out there? So there's going to be some suspicion as to who am I actually dealing with. Am I dealing with the right, organization? You're always going to be suspicious that this might be a provocation. Certainly from my angle, when I went out there to meet a known KGB officer, was no question that I'm meeting with the KGB. I just hope I'm meeting with one that really wants to leave, not.
Yeah.
And because I could always be, at any time, I could be arrested and hauled off to, interrogation. But it turns out, I learned he felt the same way. He didn't really, he had gone into the embassy in Warsaw. He thought that his visit there was undetected by anybody, but he didn't know. He didn't know if his visit in Warsaw or something he had done since then had maybe come to the attention of the KGB counterintelligence people. And that he figured that, he honestly figured that I might be KGB.
Posing as a CIA.
I'm just posing as a CIA officer. And any amount of convincing I tried to do in Moscow didn't seem to make him happy, or didn't seem to make him accept the fact that I was not KGB. I didn't. My Russian is not native fluency. It's pretty good, but I just like you're dealing with in the United States, a Russian person. You can tell it's not native English. So no matter what I did, try to convince him, he still was not convinced. Me thinking he's KGB, going to arrest me. Him thinking I'm KGB, going to arrest him. So, as I mentioned, to get the daughter to cross the border quietly and under control, we gave her a medication, but the medication was not given immediately in just one dose. We gave him like 5 medications. This was all under our doctor's supervision. 5 medications that in small dosages that would at least allow him to measure a bodily reaction, respiration, temperature, pulse, how long it took her to go to sleep, how long she slept before she woke up. And so we're going to test all these medications on his daughter. And I told my boss at the time, the chief of station, You know, I have a daughter who's just about that age, and there's no way in creation I'd want to test medications on my daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, why did you come out like a guinea pig? And I wouldn't do it. So I told my boss, that'll be the end of this case. We're going to lose him. He's just going to tell us to pound sand. Mm-hmm. Well, my boss, you know, very intelligent like he was, said, we got no other choice. The girl is not going to go to sleep just automatically.
Right.
She's going to have to be medicated somehow.
Yeah.
So I gave Victor the 5 medications in the small doses. And he reluctantly took them. And clearly, when I went to see him the next time, he'd been very diligent about testing her. Uh-huh. I got these graphs back. He was a mathematician by trade. And that recounted her respiration, temperature, pulse, all these things, when she went to sleep, when she woke up. And based on this sort of mini study that he did, our medical personnel made the decision of what size dosage and what medication he should administer. Mm-hmm. And then they sent us that medication. So he administered that medication to his daughter, and they got across with no problem. And my learning experience is, see, we're always learning. Uh-huh. My learning experience from this was when I saw him again later in the States after he had gotten out. You know, we hugged each other, we said hello, and it's wonderful to see you and all that. And he confessed. He said, you know, I thought the whole time we were working together in Moscow, you were actually KGB.
Wow.
And he said, the one thing that finally proved to me that you were not was that night you gave me the 5 medications to test on my daughter. Because he said, I'm KGB. He said, and I know how we operate. We never would have done it that way. Mm-hmm. We would have given you 1 dose of 1 medication and said, give this to your daughter, and hoped for the best. Mm. But the fact that we came out and were basically instructing him to test the 5 medications to make sure we could, as accurately as possible, not harm the child, prove to him that we were indeed who we said we were. Because he said the KGB never would have done that.
Which underscores a lot of like that core reason of why people are defecting is because of that inherent lack of regard for human life. Right. And so like that just something you thought was even on you, by your standards of the Western ideology of caring about human life, you were like, this is not good because we're just basically testing on her.
But it was testing medications.
Yeah, it was the best you could do. But even that, you would consider something you would not do for your child.
Right.
Was something that proved to him how humane we really are. It's very interesting how that scale is.
Believe me, in all the cases that I've ever worked with, there's always something that strikes you as a real teaching, element. Yeah. And that was the one, particularly in Victor's case, that was what I definitely learned, something that I never would have guessed at. In fact, I guessed that would have been the end of the case.
When in fact it was
the thing that
what
sealed
solidified it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's just, you live and you learn. Yeah. And then you go on to the next one.
How important was the information that he provided? Like, what impact did it have?
Well, I can't tell you for sure because, again, as is typical when I'm dealing with a case in the field out with the station, we learn certain things, and we're basically learning as much as we can to prove his bona fides and that he's good. He's actually who he says he is. But once he leaves, you sort of are. It's compartmentation puts you out of the loop.
Okay.
So I couldn't tell you. I mean, I can tell you for sure that for the next 20 years, well, let's say 15 years, he's worked solidly as a contractor for NSA.
Wow.
So they obviously
They
felt
kept him for a reason.
right. He had some value to them, and why wouldn't he be if you got a person who's a cryptographer for the opposites, or like if we got a cryptographer for the Russians, what we did in Victor. But if they got a cryptographer from us, they'd be doing backflips. Cryptographers are very, very valuable assets to have.
I think part of the sensational part of the story too is that this family was given such a rare opportunity to experience life in freedom, true freedom, with Western values, which they clearly longed for.
Which, all the defectors do that and have that opportunity. And it's amazing to see their eyes light up and they're just feeling this feeling of freedom, and it's like a weight off their shoulders. But some of them react differently to it.
Yeah.
It's some of them, because they've lived their entire lives in such a structured, controlled environment and society, that all of a sudden they get to the United States and they're looking for some of those, how would you say, those boundaries that were clearly laid out for them in their own environment back home, that are no longer there. They could buy whatever they wanted, do whatever they wanted.
I imagine it's overwhelming and even disorienting.
In some cases it is, and in some cases the defectors redefect and go back.
Oh, wow.
Because they just cannot adjust.
Wow.
Or maybe
all the
re-anchor
choice.
like their identity too as a human in a completely different system.
It blew my mind, but to see that there are defectors who cannot accept or adjust to the vast freedoms that they have, the levels of those freedoms. And there have been instances where they have just said, no, I can't take it. And they leave, they go back.
Wow.
But in this case, talk a little bit about Sheymov, his wife, his daughter, and just what their experience was in the early days when they made it to the United States.
Well, the normal things of adjusting to the abundance, let's say, the abundance of consumable goods. And they even had it a little better because being a major in the KGB afforded them some privileges in the Soviet Union that the normal citizen doesn't have. They had access to special stores, special, they could go to special gas stations that would never run out of gas. They could, they would, there was all, and clubs, vacation resorts, things like that. So they were better off than the common Soviet worker. But and so they had those kind of even in the United States when what was available far exceeded what they had been used to.
Wow.
So they had to adjust to that. But I would also say that the other thing we try to do for them is help them with, in the case of the Soviets, dental care. Very few of them have adequate dental care. And just getting them caught up on that can be a bundle. I don't know the exact things that they confronted. I'm sure there were a lot of them. But I was not with them while they were adjusting. And again, the compartmentation, so I'm out of the loop. But eventually I know that Victor, he got into some, how would you say, like disagreements with his handlers in the States. And it was unfortunately over things that he thought were assured him and promised him before his defection. And they hadn't been. I mean, I was definitely aware of what was promised him because I was the one making the promises up until a couple of days before he left. And he came up with, like, I'm not here to say that we were completely in the right. I'm sure there were misunderstandings on both sides, but he thought he had been assured a certain level of monetary compensation,
Okay.
which he didn't get out of the starting box. He eventually was put back in school once his English was good enough, and he got an advanced degree in business, MBA, I think it was, and
that was paid for?
Oh, yeah.
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 So he was compensated. It's just maybe his
He was compensated,
was
but
different.
not to the level that he said he had been assured. Like in Moscow, he always talked about $1 million.
Oh.
There was before Sheymov, there was a defector named Belyenko, Yuri Belyenko. He actually flew a MiG-29. That was before the MiG-29, but he flew a MiG-29. He was in the Soviet Far East, and he decided one day to break away from his formation and put it in the afterburners, and he lands in Hokkaido, the northern Japanese island.
Whoa.
Much to the chagrin of the Soviet Air Force. And they were demanding that we return the MiG-29. So what our specialists did was take it apart piece by piece, and we send them back all the pieces. It was like, so they got in different boxes. So it clearly was a message from us to them that here's your MiG-29 back, but it's in 1,700,000 pieces, all its component parts. So we did return it, but the rumor was out on the streets that Belyenko got $1 million for that,
see.
and he got resettled in the U.S., which he did. So one of the first things Victor told me, I said, "What do you want from us?" And he said, "To be exfiltrated to the United States." He said, "I also want $1 million." And I said, "Well, that's another thing I was not authorized to say." And I said, let's discuss that. We will, as we move along, let's discuss the amount of. We don't want to set any upward limit on it. We can.
Sure.
And then so, and his reason why did he want $1 million? He says, because that's what you guys gave to Belyenko, and he says, I'm worth more than Belyenko. And
yeah, so how much does the psychology of like the mindset of, say, a Russian that's conditioned to think that way, and of course he was in the upper echelon of like the KGB, so that sense of privilege and whatever, maybe some of that played into his assumptions about like how it was going to be.
Well, I don't know if there's any rule book on that.
Sure.
It just depends on the evaluation of the customer. In the case of Tolkachev,
Yeah.
After his first summer of production, we worked with him for 5-6 years directly, and after one summer, where he had produced a mammoth amount of information, we asked the customer, in this case it was the Air Force, U.S. Air Force, all of this stuff we're sending you from Tolkachev, all this information, thousands of pages of photography, and
What's it worth?
what's it worth?
Yeah.
And they said after his first summer, what he has provided so far has been worth a minimum of $2 billion
Yeah.
in R&D costs, saved R&D costs, because our whole air defense system was being developed in an entirely different direction.
Yeah.
Based on Tolkachev, they can take another turn, another crook in the road.
Hence the moniker, the $1 billion
$1 billion spy. So the Air Force really coined that.
Yeah.
They said, well, it was coined later on, but it was based on the Air Force's evaluation that he had saved the United States over $2 billion in R&D costs.
Man.
But that was only after the first summer.
Wow.
We ran for another 5 years. I mean, with Tolkachev, his production, they had to set up an entire task force at headquarters just to translate and get it disseminated. We're talking thousands and thousands of pages. So, I mean, what's he worth if Tolkachev had decided, hey, I want to be exfiltrated? And had we got him out successfully, would we said that, okay, we'll give you $2 billion? No, that wouldn't have happened.
Sure.
It would have been reduced somewhere. But I mean, I'm glad I'm not in a job that has to make those decisions.
Sure.
But that was one of the things where it got sour for Victor. He thought he had been promised a certain amount. Headquarters said, well, that's not our understanding. And so it actually ended up not in court, but a lot of back and forth, and a lot of bad blood developed as a result of it.
And now, is that all, like, did he chronicle that in his book as well? Do you say?
The book only got him to, the Tower of Secrets only got him to when he left Moscow. So the whole chronicle of the struggle
of just
how to make him whole.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly all his medication, his education, and I know that part of the final settlement, it didn't go to court. They settled it out of court.
Wow.
And I don't know the full details, but I know that he had and I went to it many times, a beautiful house in Vienna, Virginia.
Okay.
That was.
So I mean, he was taken care of. It was just a matter of expectations.
There's no question he was taken care of, but he apparently had a slightly higher estimation of his worth. And I have no idea what the NSA gave him.
Sure.
I mean, that was the real customer.
Yeah.
And he worked up there for many years as a contractor. I say worked up there. He actually was given places to come, and he didn't go into the NSA building. They brought him things to work on. But that went on for a good many years,
Sure.
And how much they're worth. I know the question probably begs the point. Okay, I'm a KGB major. How much am I worth? You're a Navy admiral. How much are you worth? You're an Army.
Such a loaded question. I mean, it's very ambiguous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous, and it's open to debate. How much a person's worth.
Okay.
Well, you already mentioned the MiG-29 pilot, but earlier you were talking and this is before breakfast, you were talking about the MiG-29 pilot, Alex.
Alex.
That's another real life story.
So that was a little bit later on. The Sheymov, Bilyenko actually was like 1971, 72.
Oh wow. Okay.
Next Sheymov, I don't say next came because others came in between them. Haven't mentioned them. But then Sheymov was first surfaced in 79, 80. Tolkachev first serviced in the late 70s, but there was a lot of back and forth. It was difficult to establish contact with him. We finally did in January of 79. And he was on the books until 85.
That's the $1 billion spy, right?
Yes.
Tolkachev. And then, okay.
And so that was all basically late 70s, early 80s. And then when I got to East Berlin in 88, I started meeting with other individuals or identifying other individuals, of which Alex was one. Alex was another volunteer, and he turned out to be an instructor pilot in the latest export model at the time of the MiG-29. So Bilyenko was 70. Gone from MiG-25 up to MiG-29 by that time. Oh, there was other Sukhoi aircraft and others that were developed, but Alex in particular was involved with the MiG-29.
So tell us about how Alex came into the picture. Like, when did you first see him, and tell us the story.
Well, it would have been I'm trying to think of the exact time. It was in the fall. probably in the fall of in the fall of I want to say 89, summer or fall of 89.
Okay.
And we were getting a lot of volunteers.
And volunteers are walk-ins, right? Like they're just walking in.
Well, we used to call them walk-ins.
Okay.
Now we call them volunteers.
Volunteers.
Because
got it.
they don't have to walk. I mean, Tolkachev was a volunteer. He didn't walk in.
I see.
He put
okay.
a note in somebody's car, just dropped it in the front seat.
Okay.
So it's somebody offering his services,
Okay.
unsolicited. And yes, Alex was a volunteer. Mm-hmm. We're getting a lot of walk-ins, volunteers in that time frame in East Berlin, because there was a lot of unrest in East Germany, a lot of turmoil. The government was starting to slowly collapse. People were demonstrating in the streets. It was really becoming very chaotic. And a lot of people, particularly Russians, that were assigned to East Germany, as was Alex. He was a member of the Soviet Air Force, assigned in East Germany. Was part of the Soviet group forces in Germany. A lot of these people started to conclude, not without merit, that this might be their only chance to defect and to get to the West. You know, West Berlin was just crossing a few streets. Well, you had to get through the wall, too.
Right.
But, I mean, a Soviet officer probably could figure a way how to do that. Mm-hmm. In any event, we were getting a lot of walk-ins. And probably, I don't know any total numbers, but there was a lot of walk-ins who were just not valuable at all. They had no access to anything we were interested in. Mm-hmm. They might have been tourists who were taking a tour of East Germany, and they decided to say, well, let's see if we can go to the American embassy and have them get us out of here.
Yeah.
So a lot of them I had to send on their way, and I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. So when Alex walked in, my initial feeling, oh my gosh, another Soviet walk-in. Here we go. And when I went down to see him in the room where these people were staged, and I saw him, it didn't do anything to change my mind. He didn't look like anything like a MiG-29. My vision of a MiG-29 pilot was, I didn't know what he was, but he looked like a tourist. I mean, we're talking about like Hawaiian shirt and cut-off shorts.
That was the picture.
Yeah. And, I mean, might not have been a Hawaiian shirt, but it was that type of style.
Yeah.
When I came into the room where he was sitting waiting for me, I would never in front of a walk-in like say, yeah, get out of here, laugh in his face. But had I been inclined to do that, I would have.
Internally,
Because
you were thinking
he
it,
didn't
yeah.
look like he had any value whatsoever. And but before I sent him on his way, he said he had really hoped that he could be of some help to us. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how's that? It's just my job. And I said, well, what are you? And that's when he laid the bombshell down. He said, I'm an instructor pilot in the MiG-29, the latest export model that they have here in East Germany. Oh, my gosh. So then I realized I had, when you're fishing, you get this bite on the line, and it clearly is
The bobber's going down hard.
something's pulling on that line. I got the giant blue heron or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's a fucking bird, I think. But anyway, but I had something on the line. I didn't know what it was, and but I asked him to look. I said, look, if you are a MiG-29 pod, I don't know anything about the MiG-29. But I'm going to give you, I asked him how much time he could spend with me. He said, about a half an hour. I said, I'm just going to give you a legal pad, and you start writing. Write in Russian, and use numbers, whatever you could. What you're doing is basically you got to prove to me, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that you know what you're talking about as far as MiG-29 is concerned. I want everything you know that's classified, it's proprietary, about avionics, weapons systems, electronics. And so he said, okay. So he just started writing. At the end of 30 minutes, he had like 5 pages of MiG-29 data, or what he said was MiG-29 data.
Uh-huh.
And I made an arrangement with him. I said, we're going to have our experts look at this. Mm-hmm. If it's good, I'll meet you at this location at this time. If it's not good, you'll never see me again. I just won't go to the location. And so I sent that secure fax back to Washington. And sure enough, the next morning, they came out and assured me that I had a legitimate MiG-29 pilot on my hands.
Wow.
And no question. And basically his knowledge of the MiG-29 outstripped their knowledge of the MiG-29 back in Washington.
Based on 5 pages that he wrote in 30 minutes. Yeah.
Sometimes all it takes is one or 2 sentences.
Sure.
So anyway, I went and I met him and started working with him in East Germany. He was assigned to a Soviet air base outside of a small farming village in East Germany. But it was not far from the major city of Leipzig.
Okay.
Down south of East Berlin. And so once his 5 pages of written work proved to be true, I went to meet with him, and we started meeting every week, every other week, down in Leipzig, large major city. And we'd meet on a park bench.
Wow.
And he'd bring me whatever he had been able to produce over the past week since the previous meeting. And it was interesting with him. I gave him some tropels. Mm-hmm. He brought them back to me right away and said, these stupid cameras, I can't get them to work. He said, give me a Pentax, regular 35 millimeter camera.
Wow.
And I said, well...
If you're caught with that.
That was our headquarters' first reaction.
Yeah.
They said, we can't give him a Pentax. What if he's caught with it? He said, that's nonsense. Anybody can go in the East European countries. They had these hard currency stores where if you were a tourist with hard currency, like German marks or English pounds, they welcomed you at the hard currency store because it was worth far more than their silly East German marks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or you could be a diplomat, or you could be any foreigner. Mm-hmm. So he says, I can go into the hard currency store, and I can buy a Pentax tomorrow. I said, really? He said, yeah, sure. And he said, I can easily get away with using it on the base or having it on the base.
Sure.
It's a sign of how Western
status.
It's a status symbol. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, well, I knew headquarters wasn't going to authorize me to issue him a Pentax. So I checked out the prices of Pentax in the hard currency store, and the next time he got a bonus of $350. Surprise, surprise. What did he do with his bonus?
He went and bought
a Pentax for himself.
That was expensive back then.
Well, I mean, it was
latest and greatest.
It was regular 35 millimeter Pentax, Nikon, all those. So he bought this thing and started taking pictures with it, and the production jumped by 75%. It was so much better.
So what was his? Was the story with Sheymov? He was, he wanted primarily he just wanted him and his family to be exfiltrated, and he wanted financial security and things like that. But then, what was Alex's deal? Like, what did he want? What was his mindset?
It should come as no surprise. he was disaffected with the Soviet Air Force and their regulations and the life that he was looking ahead to. And so he decided the best answer to his problem would be to get exfiltrated with him. But he had 2 children. So it was a wife and 2 kids. A little bit easier because we weren't getting him out of Soviet Union.
Okay.
East Germany was a different, much easier environment for the exfiltrations. But certainly the time of the...
it was later,
It
right?
was late. It was 89. So we were almost up there. The wall came down in November of 89. So after that, you could just walk across the wall.
So again, to compare the 2 stories, when the customer, when the United States got the pictures from Sheymov, immediately they're like, get him out now. But with Alex, he stayed on. How long did he stay on, and what was the thought process there of like keeping him in?
Well, you have to realize this was right about the time of the first Gulf War. And the Iraqis were flying MiG-29s.
Okay.
And so they really wanted him out. But as far as timing is concerned, so he first appeared and walked in let's say September, maybe late August of 79. And
89, 79, 89?
89, excuse me, 89,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
89. And we got him out in December of 89, so it was still short.
Okay.
But there was never any back and forth of, should he stay longer? He stayed as long as it took him to basically photograph the entire library of MiG-29 documents.
Wow.
So I mean, he got all the field manuals, all the different, everything he had. There's nothing else for him to do. He literally ran out of work to do. I mean, I guess in theory, if he wasn't really so disaffected, we could have allowed him to go back to the Soviet Union, get a new job. Maybe he'd be involving a new aircraft or something different. And but in this case, in his mind, it was, I produce all the documents I have on the MiG-29,
and you get me out.
Get me out.
Okay,
that was what it was. It was a quid pro quo, and he indeed got everything he could on the MiG-29.
And so do you happen to know, I know like there's compartmentalization after the fact for you as a handler / operative, but like, do you happen to know how he fared once he got to the States?
Well, there was a little bit like Hall, there was a certain adjustment period, but I didn't continue to have dealings with him as I did with Victor earlier. But last I heard of Alex, he first went down to that Red Flag, I think it is, in
Nevada.
In Nevada, and at Nellis or someplace. And they were flying. They fly against aggressor squadrons and all that. And he went down to teach them Soviet tactics because he had been up before Berlin, before East Berlin or East Germany. He had been in flying combat missions in Afghanistan with the Soviet Air Force. So he was up to date on the Soviet tactics, and at least for the MiG-29.
And when he left, did you follow the same protocol that you did with Sheymov? Like when, you're talking about the disappearance, or was it something that like...
Oh, no, it was no disappearance without a trace. We told him, clearly he would be gone with his wife, with his family. There was no effort to make disappearance without a trace because it wasn't like the Soviets would stop the production of MiG-29. That's all they had. That's
so it wasn't going to change anything,
really. It wasn't
going
to change anything. Like with Victor, we wanted the longer we could keep it, at least in their mind, as a question mark, they would probably keep the ciphers in place, which they did. But none of that applied with Alex.
Okay.
So we
pack your bags and let's go.
And let's go. Yeah. And that's exactly what we did.
Wow.
We flew out of Berlin one night to Frankfurt, Germany, in the west, and that same night we got on a C-5 with the New York National Guard and flew from Frankfurt to Washington.
Dang.
So
I bet I just put myself in the shoes of the family, on that plane and landing and touching down, and just how that must feel.
Well, it was the actually the C-5 pilots, the New York National Guard. One was a pilot for American Airlines, and one was a pilot for, I don't know, TWA or something. They were airline pilots doing weekend duty, and so we're coming into Andrews, and it was about, as I recall, about 2 a.m. And so they invited us both up to the cockpit to watch the landing at Andrews.
Oh,
so
wow.
He was a Soviet MiG pilot now flying into Andrews Air Force Base.
So you were there for the moment.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I flew back with them.
Sure.
Normally I wouldn't do that, but in this case,
You did.
I did.
And what, can you recall anything specific about that moment for his wife, his kids? I mean, how old were his kids at the time?
Well, the kids were pretty well asleep. We were occupying the crew quarters on the C-5. But the husband and the wife, and I think we got pictures of that too, sitting in the crew quarters, and the crew was feeding them all. They had, of course, boxed lunches, but they were feeding the boxed lunches, and so you see them stuffing their faces with the boxed lunches, and they were wearing sweaters, and so the crew had Velcro types patches with our American flags and stuff. So these Velcro patches were all over their sweaters.
All over them.
So we were celebrating.
Celebrating.
They didn't have any alcohol on the plane, but
Did they want some?
I'm sure you wouldn't have turned it down. But,
Vodka.
Yeah, but no. So it was interesting for them too, because when we landed at Andrews Air Force Base, there was a contingent of agency personnel out there to meet us. And they basically got us in cars and drove us right out to Warrenton in Virginia, on right off Highway 29 in Warrenton. We had a safe house where it was available for this type of thing, and we, for the first month or so, we moved them into that house, and that was where they got adjusted.
I wish we could show the picture of her with that cooking that first meal, because you can kind of see the
joy in
the
her
relief
face.
and excitement and joy, of being here finally.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing those. So like one thing that kind of comes to mind is Sheymov is a very short time frame. Alex is a much different time frame. Like I'm assuming that there's
actually he was only a few more months. I mean, but. Yeah, there were two completely different cases, but basically Alex's deal was you work here in place. So for those between September and December, it's only maybe a month longer than Victor stayed. But I was meeting him every week, almost till he left, and getting production the whole time. Where in Victor's case, NSA wanted him for what was up here, not manuals. But it was something with how that's a spiral thing, so it wouldn't work with that book. But if you have a regular book with a binding on it, if you just open up the middle, how the pages will sort of flap closed, and you'd see when he'd take the pictures of the pages.
Oh wow!
The book would be manipulating the camera. But you see these hands on the side of the pages with fingernail polish on them. So his wife was actually the one holding the books open. Wow. So she was definitely a partner in crime for every step of the way. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. But no, those are two very, both Victor and Alex in their own way came special rewards and gratification for me, because they were just a couple of really, people who had been so convinced in what they were doing, so dedicated, goal-oriented, and they were ready to go.
How did it feel for you to be, have such a pivotal role in these two cases. You know what I mean? Looking back,
there's nothing like it. I mean, that's what you get into this business for. But they were both interesting cases in that they intimately involved their families, the children, the wives, and so I think a lot of people think traditionally about spycraft of meetings on dark alleyways, and usually it's a cold or rainy night and that type of thing, and there's a lot of those. But these two examples are ones where there's a very personal involvement, and you got personal with their families, and so it was just a lot more to it than than would meet the eye. It lets you know there was a really very, very deep and serious personal side to this business. I showed you that one picture of with Alex's daughter, where I'm sitting on the sofa. I mean, what part of the job description of CIA operations officer includes translating Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to a 5-year-old girl from Russia?
Yeah.
I mean, so it puts a real human spin on it.
Sure.
And of course, that's the thing that I've got to convince all of my students of, is that what we're doing in the training here isn't just training you to be able to relate to people in back alleys at night. It's you're going to have to relate to sometimes children of 4 and 5 years old, and basically engage them in this activity. So
Wow.
it is. It's a very humbling type of, very gratifying,
Right.
but also at the same time very humbling.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good spot to take a break, and we'll pick it back up in just a little bit.
Sure.
But everybody watching, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Adolf Tolkachev and Dave's involvement with the $1 billion spy. So, we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.